Okay, this passenger side fender is ready to epoxy. Sandblasted all this back here where there was some surface rust, and right here there was a small hole that had rusted through. Nothing major, just used that copper backer and welded that up. Sandblasted all this too. I'll have some body work in here, so I went down to the metal. I'm just going to spot the epoxy in everywhere else. Went through all the edges just to make sure nothing that's been added to this flakes off later. Also got this bracket done. I've got a section put in right there. You can see where it's welded in a little bit. So now it's nice and solid. I'm going to epoxy the back side of all this and then the front of this until I get ready to paint it, just to keep it from flash rusting. I went ahead and did that since I've got the epoxy mixed up for the fender, and I had to get the welder out for that. I went ahead and just welded in a patch. So I'm going to get this on here, and I'll put a second coat on this after about 20 minutes or so. Okay, I've got two coats back here where I had the sandblast area, and out here also, and then the bodywork area. That's going to give me something to sand so I can put filler over it and hopefully not cut through it, or at least minimize it. I did have to take the seam sealer off that was on this joint right there. I had to take it off about 2 inches up, so I'll add seam sealer back to that once I get ready to put it back on the car. Once I get it on the car, I won't be able to get back to that spot. And I'll probably go ahead and spray some red back behind there once I do that, because I won't be able to get to that since it'll have to be painted on the car. Alright, I've got epoxy on the bare metal of the fender. I'll do a little body work right in this area where this fender was rolled. I actually rolled it all the way in. It was only about halfway. Rolled it all the way over, left the corner here so it's stiff, and also back here as much as was there. This was rolled about halfway, so I left that, but it's flat from about here all the way up, and I've added some seam sealer. So you can see that, some 5887. I taped it off so it'd be nice and slick, just like a door skin would be. And I'll get the body work done. I think I need filler, just some regular filler in here, and I'm going to glaze this entire arch, and I've got a spot, I think it was right in somewhere in the middle. I need to put some glaze along the top there, but I'll check it with some wax and grease remover and see where I might need some, but I think that's about it. Primer ought to get the rest of it. Just finished rolling this one. Trying to save the paint that's here because it's all in good shape and it was just put on here. Got very, very minimal distortion. There's just a little there. That's about it. The rest of the fender's pretty much perfect. I'm gonna put a little primer on just to block it out flat, but I did the same thing here. It's all the way back to the inner edge or inner face of the fender. So I cleaned behind here before I closed it up, and then I ran a scuff pad through here so that I've got this sanded all the way up to that step. What I'll do is I'll sand this lightly here and just go same way with a band of seam sealer around here once I get everything primed. Alright, ready to prime these. I'm going to spot some epoxy on the bare metal. Even though the primer is good for cut through, I want to make sure this job's completely sealed up before I put any primer on it. Might be okay for just a run-of-the-mill collision repair, but I'm going to go ahead and epoxy this metal. And I did put a little bit on the back side. Got it taped off. I sprayed a little on the back side just because when I prepped this out here doing the body work, I cut through a little bit of it. So I'm going to get that on there and give it about a half hour and put 3 coats of primer on these. Okay, I'm getting the doors ready to prime. This one I worked out some dents, some very minor dents with PDR rods, and I don't need any filler on this. I'm just going to spot some epoxy where I cut through, where there were some chips on the edges. That right there was a bigger chip that I had to go through to the metal on. Most of it just needs a spot of epoxy where I cut through, like I said, and then I'm going to give it 3 coats of primer so I can block it out flat. Now this driver's door was replaced not too long ago with a used door, and I was seeing rings. I don't know if you can see this or not, but you can see there's a ring. See that edge right there? There are rings like that all over the door. And this is what happens when you put body filler right up to a hard feather edge. There was a ring right here, and this filler was not feathered into the original finish, which this didn't need to be put on the original paint anyway. It should have been taken down to the metal. So I'm going to take all the filler off, and I have a feeling they skimmed the whole door. I'm going to see what it really needs. I'll go down to the metal, most likely everywhere, and then epoxy coat this thing, and then scuff that and do fill work on top of it. It's nice and straight, but there are rings everywhere. I definitely don't want to paint over this. You can see more rings here. There's an edge. See that edge? It shows up after the paint shrinks all the way down. If you don't feather that filler, that's probably a hard line in the original paint there. But they're all over it. Just going to keep stripping back, and I may end up going to the SCT tool to strip it a little faster. I just wanted to see what was here to begin with. But I'm going to go ahead and take all this back right here and see if there's actually any damage here, or if they just wiped the whole door for some reason. Okay, I went through the filler, and this is why there was a ring. Whoever did this just sanded a spot out of the original paint and didn't bring the E-coat and paint all the way back, you know, an inch or so, and spread that feather edge back to put the filler in. That's why it shrunk right there on that edge, that hard interface. And those are all over it. So I'm going to take everything off. Okay, down to bare metal. I use the contour from Eastwood with a 40 grit drum or whatever on it. Stripped most of it down with that, then I went down to the metal completely with 80. Then 180, and all these spots where there's actually a gouge in it here. Got a couple, there's a low spot, one there, a couple low spots here. You can kind of see that's it's more of a small crease. I can focus on it. A little bit of a crease right there and right there. This edge of the door was actually bowed down, so I've tapped this up, which has got this up here. Got this rolled a little bit. So I'm going to try to run a long glue tab here, pull that up some. Same thing here, use a short crease tab on each one of these to try to lift it. I'm trying to keep from having to put any filler at all. There's a little bit of a wave in the top here, but that's as flat as I'd probably get it, do anything to it anyway. So we're going to lift this spot, those at the bottom, and there's a little bit of a low spot maybe right there where that gouge is. The best thing might be to just zap that with the welder to fill it in, but I don't really want to burn the back of the panel. There's a sound deadener back there that I would have to pull back and then treat. So that might be best to just blast down in there or scratch it out with a fiberglass pen and then put a little bit of fiberglass filler in that spot rather than burn the paint off the back. For the most part, it's pretty straight. There was a lot of filler in this whole front quarter of the door here. And I'm not really sure why. There's really nothing there. I think they were trying to fill something here and maybe part of this, and they just went ahead and wiped the whole thing, but didn't need near as much filler as it had. I'm going to get some glue tabs on here and try to get up what I can. And if I can get enough of a reflection on it, I'll polish this with 400. If I can get enough reflection, I may be able to work it with the PDR rod. Okay, got this low spot here filled, and a little bit in the little chip here. Got it all scuffed. I did 180 everywhere I could get the DA, and the rest of it is just a red Scotch-Brite. But it's ready to epoxy the bare metal and prime. I got a spot back here of some rust I found. I went ahead and blasted that, and I'll spray a little epoxy on this just for now to seal it off, and I'll come back and I'll finish all that out when I paint the inside jamb. Got the other door ready. Just epoxied the bare metal there. I'll scuff this, but I'm gonna go ahead and get the epoxy on this. So while that's drying, I can sand out a little bit more on the spoiler I'm working on for another car, and then I can get the primer put on this by that time, and then I can go into priming that.